Hello, my name is Lori. Welcome to We Are Quilters. Today, episode 7 is Treasure from Trash. I think you are going to love this. It is a no-brainer way to make quilt squares. All you have to do is think about a square you'd like to make and do it. Oh, you need some scrap paper. I taught this class once at a quilt camp and they loved it. If you have never sewn this way, give it a try. It is fantastic. It is a great way to relax. If you're interrupted, you don't have to worry about figuring out where you were and what you were doing. You just pick up right where you left off, and it eats up lots and lots of scraps. Let's get busy. Let's quickly review the two kinds of foundation piecing we're not doing. Traditional paper piecing, which produces a small quilt like this. You have papers that have lines on, so you know where to sew the fabric to and where to trim. It comes out with wonderfully fantastic points. Very controlled. Way too controlled for today. Here's another example of a patch that was paper pieced. I picked this up at a Quilt Guild meeting. Here's another form of foundation piecing, English paper piecing. I love hexies, and English paper piecing doesn't have to be just hexies. It can be other things. We will cover that in a much later episode. I do love my little minions there in the middle. I'm slowly working on a hexie quilt, but that takes time and too much brain power for today too. Ready, set, let's go. Have you ever felt like this? Frustrated, ready to cry, scream, throw fits? Or maybe you feel frazzled like this poor guy and you just need some release. Or maybe you're just tired and bored with yourself. Well, here's my favorite kind of foundation piecing on paper. You can do this on cloth, but paper's my favorite. I use a Reader's Digest, tear out some pages, doesn't matter if it's colorful or not. I fold it, and then I whip out those paper scissors and I cut it into a square. Yes, paper scissors. They're labeled. No fabric on those. I tear out a few more pages. I use my original square, lop off some extra, and I'm ready to go. I have some foundations for my squares. These will be trimmed to 4.5 inches later on. Oh, by the way, you should always iron them because paper does shrink, believe it or not. So I iron it before I get started. There it is. Beautiful, ready, ironed, pre-shrunk, and ready to turn into a beautiful block. Or you can use a triangle template, or these are the arches from an AccuQuilt wedding ring. We're going to make 5 different kinds of blocks today. First, we're going to start with background. Here, I just have my container of white or light or blender background fabrics, and I slowly pick up a few and I add them to the block. There are a lot of repeat steps here. The smaller the pieces you use, the more steps you have to do, but it's not hard. There's no thinking involved. You just pick a scrap. If you like it, you use it, you sew it onto the paper. And then after you sew it on, you iron it and trim it. No brainer. And I always trim after each step because that's what the whole paper's for. And then I go back to the sewing machine and I find another scrap. Do I like the way it fits? Maybe, maybe not. I read around in the box a little bit. And then I find a scrap that makes me happy and I sew it on. And then I sew it on, and then I iron it, and then I trim it if I need to. So I'm going to turn on some music while it goes through this process of sew, iron, trim. Enjoy. You now have one little roughed out foundation pieced background block. Save that for next week. Feeling just a little better? I am, just a little. Now we have a monochromatic block, which is not much different than the block we just did. I chose green because I have a big hunkin' bag of green scraps here with me. I've placed 2 small pieces of green fabric on there, and I want you to see the process of using small pieces. That's mostly what I have in my bag, but not just. So I'm adding another piece of green. I cut that piece because it was a rather long strip. So now I'm going to add it on there, and it's the same steps. Sew, iron, trim if you need to. Don't need to trim yet. So here it is. Again, I find another piece, I sew it on, and as soon as I sew it on there, it's taking a moment to get that lined up the way I want. As soon as I sew it on, then I take it back over to the ironing board and I iron it. Come on. Oh, I trim a little piece away there. You'll notice I use the point of the scissors to trim the thread, pull it back because it's already sewn, and then I trim that little piece away. And then I iron it. Sometimes you have to do that. Use your scissors to trim the thread, not the paper, because you don't want to mess up your little scissors. And so I'm going to put on some music while you enjoy this process. It's a no-brainer. Enjoy. Here it is, the last little trimming. Oh, a beautiful monochromatic green block to use in a project. Woohoo! Feeling a lot better. like New Year's Eve. That brings us to a mixed scraps block, which is even more no-brainer than the last two. I put a couple blocks on there. I trim it. Here we go. So. And they don't have to be any color. This is even freer form than the other two blocks. And I iron. Don't need to trim. Take it back over. Root through my little drawer of tiny pieces and find something. Wait, did I find something? Maybe. No. Oh, I love this piece, but it just doesn't fit right now. Maybe I can come back to that later. Yeah, it doesn't fit there either. So it's just not going to work the way I want it to. How frustrating. So I just get a different piece for right now. Maybe I can come back to that. That's always a possibility. So here we go. Sew, iron, trim, and repeat. So I'm going to put on some inspirational music for you to listen to while we finish sewing this little block together. Here it is, the last little bit of trimming. Trim. And the block is done. Fantastic. Love those little mummies in there. Yay! Oh, I'm feeling so much better. Like a new day is dawning. This brings us to specialized shapes. Now, I used a cutout of a triangle from AccuQuilt. It is a 60-degree triangle. And I just used scrap paper and I sewed it on. This probably is the quickest block because it is small. And later on, I will use the AccuQuilt trimmer to trim it. So 4 pieces of fabric take care of this entire shape. Oh, there's a piece that it's not plain background, but it'll blend right in. I love this method for getting things close to a shape so I can trim it on the AccuQuilt cutter. But you could use a ruler too. Not much different. So here's that last little piece. I'm not even going to put on the inspirational music because this time it is done with that little bit of work. Oh, do you ever feel like jumping for joy when you finally get something finished? I do. And here's the other shape. This is the arch for a wedding ring quilt from AccuQuilt. I mean, you could use your own. And I sew pieces onto it. I left about 1/4 of an inch extra, so I know if I have fabric hanging out over, I will have enough to cut away and trim it and make it look all nice and neat. I will share that process with you in the next video. I think we've had enough fun for today, and this really is no brainer, and it does take a little bit of thinking to trim. So sometimes I make up to 10 of these at one time, and I shove all 10 through, and then I iron all 10 and trim all 10, and then I start over again so that I am not wasting time going one step back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So when I make 10 of these, I feel like I have accomplished something for the day. I keep them in a nice container. I'll show you that here in a moment. I have quite a little pile of these going so that I will be ready to make that wedding ring quilt. So actually, I think I'll put on a little bit of inspirational music and let you listen while I finish. And here it is. Ta-da! Done. It's a fantastic little arch just waiting to be trimmed out. Like I said, you could trim it by hand. Woohoo! This is exactly how I feel. Remember how happy you were? And let me say, it's a party. It's a party now. So let's do a very quick little review of what we have accomplished today. A nice stack of little blocks. Here's the pile I was talking about. And here's some more in yellow, just waiting to be trimmed. And I also have quite a little stack here. I have a quilt in mind, a pattern I will share with you later on with all different colors of blocks. And here's a sneak peek. Episodes 7, 8, and 9 are closely related. So here is a little peek from episode 9. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. See you next week for episode 8. Like and subscribe.